The planning conversation starts here on the Income Protection Podcast. Here's your host, Mike Cogdall and Grayson Owen.
All right, Mike, we're back. And today we have a special guest with us. But before we introduce Lori, how's everything in Florida?
It's all good, my friend. Celebrated Mother's Day with torrential downpours all day, but that's all right. Mother's Day was good. You know, I've got 2 daughters and a spouse, so we did the Mother's Day thing and had a great time. Sun's out now, and old Mr. Mike's only got 1 travel basketball tournament left. Only 1. And then I'm done with it. It seems like I've been doing it for about 2.5 straight years. But anyway, done until like next year. But yeah, things are good. What about you, my friend?
All good. Yep, all's well in Savannah. We had a crazy storm system roll through here as well. So I think we're good on rain for a while. And the forecast is showing nothing but sun for the next week. So I'll take that all day long, Mike. But yeah, we're here today with a special guest, Lori Boggs from Petersen International Underwriters. Lori, thanks for joining us on the call today.
Thanks for having me. It's good to be here.
Awesome. Well, just to start out, I just wanted to ask you, how would you define Lloyd's, and what are the main specializations where brokers and advisors should be calling you?
Absolutely. Thank you for having me. You know, Lloyd's is such a great, market for those who need more coverage. Our goal is to get everybody to at least 60% replacement in the event of a disability. And when we get censuses or an application on a CEO, maybe, an attorney, a physician, sometimes we do the calculation and they're only going to get 30% replacement with their IDI and their group LTD coverage. And that's a problem. The problem is also that most people don't know that they're only covered 30%. They think group coverage is enough or group and IDI is enough. And, we've been doing a great job of getting the message out there with people like you. So, that's our goal first and foremost, is to get people to 60% replacement at least.
If we were to also dive into the business market, because I know that you and I have worked on a lot of cases and you spent a lot of time working in the business and executive marketplace, what solutions are out there that Lloyd's helps with in those markets too?
We help on the business side, buy, sell, business overhead. Anytime a domestic carrier says, no, they can't do this for you, or you don't get enough coverage through the domestic carriers, you can come to us. On the buy-sell side, we write a lot of one-person buy-sell simply because sometimes there's only one person that's sick, one of the owners. We write a lot of BOE cases where there's too many partners for the domestic side. And so we'll write, physician practices with 10 orthopedic surgeons. We're okay with that. So what we want to do is not replace what anybody can get on the domestic side, because we feel that's important to start there. But anytime you need help with someone who has an impaired risk, and let's talk about that, someone with heart problems, past history, we've been seeing a lot of people, past history of opioid abuse. They're fine now. They're still on Suboxone. And that is something that the domestic carriers don't want to look at, even though the person may be recovered for 3 years. Just the fact that they're on Suboxone, they can't get coverage, but they can come to us for that.
Lori, do you want to quickly explain to the listening audience domestic carrier versus Lloyd's, just at a 30,000-foot level, and then go back for a second and talk about like specifically buy sell, because you guys will do things like not 3 million, you'll do 30 million. So give our audience an idea of like some of the things that you really do. Plus, you got an NBA draft and an NFL draft that just happened, and you'll take some of those folks too, correct?
Absolutely. So the domestics are in the United States, and they write people who are citizens of the United States working and living in the United States. Companies like that, Standard, Principal, they write individual DI coverage. Lloyd's is a little different, where Lloyd's is a marketplace. It's in London. When we write cases through Lloyd's, they hold 100% of the risk. Petersen International does not hold the risk at all. But the Lloyd's coverage that we offer is, even though we offer high limit coverage to healthy people, this is where you go for high risk coverage. They still cover much of the marine industry, but they also work in the special risk industry, and that's individual DI. Because we are a company that's based out of, Lloyd's is based out of London, Petersen International can write expats or foreign nationals that may be living outside the United States, but they have a nexus to the United States by way of address or company, and they don't have to be U.S. citizens. For the buy sell, we see some pretty crazy stuff. I would say on the DI side, we can go 30, 50 million per risk. The underwriters feel more comfortable at a lower level, but we certainly can get $30 million of buy sell coverage, and we'll layer on top of the domestic coverage with standard or principal or mass mutual. We do quite a bit of that.
Yeah. And more businesses, I think, need to be considering this type of coverage. And Mike and I have talked about this on previous episodes. Obviously, the LIMRA numbers in the buy sell disability category are very low. And I believe they don't include the Lloyd's figures, but we all know that there's small businesses, middle market businesses. We see them all the time, Laura. We've worked on several of these cases together where the domestic market does a great job starting, but if the business value is over a certain amount, they need the high limit coverage. So I'm glad that there's a trusted resource in the industry that we can go to for that type of solution, because not all businesses or owners are going to have liquidity to facilitate those buyouts. So
absolutely. And it's really important to take a look at that stuff with, if you're sitting down with a financial planner, this type of stuff should be brought up. And I always tell producers when I talk to them, the more products that you sell to a client or a company, if you're on the benefit side, the stickier they are. So they're less likely to leave you. Why? Because it's going to be difficult to move all of those products. So we write quite a bit of guaranteed standard issue on the individual DI side. We go down to 3 lives on mandatory plans and 10 lives on voluntary plans. And to me, if you can do that, it makes it so much easier, because you never have to talk to a client about, we can't cover you because you have this situation. It's usually medical reasons. There's none of that. It's guaranteed issue. There's little to no medical underwriting. Of course, you have to be actively at work, and the financial is proven by a census. So it's very simple.
Yep. Lori, can you explain again to the audience the difference between, because you have background in all products, obviously, because you did work domestic carriers forever as well, the difference between like a non-CAM product and how Lloyd's works and it looks, so that there's not a misunderstanding of thinking they're getting something because they're not exactly the same. Could you just differentiate between the two so people have a very clear understanding, because that's our job, is to educate on how the two look. You can go domestic first or however you want to do it, and explain what Lloyd's like on a renewal basis and how things like that work.
Absolutely. So on the Lloyd's side, because Lloyd's they never issue a permanent type product. All of our products are renewable, so they can come back in to renew the policy. We help with that. But on the domestic side, once you put a product in place on the DI side, whether it's buy, sell, BOE, or DI, the premiums can never change. As long as you pay the premiums on time and the policy stays in force. And to me, that's powerful, right? I bought my kids coverage when they graduated college. They were, 22 years old. My daughter a little older because she's a veterinarian, but I bought them coverage, and they have this coverage and they're paying low premiums because they're not buying coverage when they're 50. And that's why Petersens, they want you to get that coverage first, because it's a non-cancelable. Once you purchase it, it's going to stay in place, including the premiums. They're never going to change. On the Lloyd's side, we don't have permanent products, but like I said, you can renew them. The premiums will change because there's a term on the policy. So it's anywhere, depending on who you are, 1 year to 5 years. So if you're an attorney, you're probably going to get a 5-year term. You're going to keep those rates in place for 5 years. If you're an athlete, we're probably going to give you a 1-year term. And so you have to renew that policy after 1 year.
And I've never had issues with renewals, just so you know. And actually, Petersen International has always worked, I would say, almost conjoined or hand in hand with the domestic carriers and all of us that are out there as wholesalers, just so everybody understands that there's never really a competition, I think, is one of the best ways to put it. And you could elaborate on that a little bit, but it really is working hand in hand to make it possible for the client to have the most or the best or whatever the coverage, what their goal is. It's our goal to make sure that that happens.
Absolutely. And we have some relationships with domestic carriers. I won't name them, but they have programs in place where if they decline someone for disability coverage, they automatically feed us the information and we make an offer. So, and as far as the renewals, we respect the fact that people have been paying premiums for 5 years or 3 years. And we want to make it, we want to make the process simple. My, years at Petersen International, I don't see a lot of people being declined again, because we're in that high risk category. Someone with a progressive disease like MS or ALS, we likely won't offer coverage. But again, someone with a past opioid addiction, they're fine now. It's only been a year or two. We're going to look at them. Cancer. I don't know, you must know a lot of people that have cancer. I mean, it's been crazy the past 2 years, the amount of friends that I have that have cancer, young and older. I mean, I know someone 35 years old that was just diagnosed with cancer. So if you don't purchase this coverage, you're crazy, especially when you're young. But we look at that as well. People with past history of cancer, and we see some pretty crazy stuff. A lot of sleep apnea, a lot of people with diabetes and heart conditions. And we will offer coverage in those scenarios.
And what's interesting, you just did two things. One, if it's ALS, which is just heart-wrenching anyway, you're probably paying a claim even if you go to non-renewal, right? Because it's debilitating and there's no getting out of that one. So if you had a 5-year and you got ALS, you probably would end up paying anywhere from 12 to 36 or 48 months in a claim, unfortunately, but you probably would. Diabetes, the thing I find interesting there is you guys make it easy for diabetes, and most diabetics I know take better care of themselves than people that are not diabetic when it comes to diet and exercise, at least a fair number of people. So yeah, you do things well. And one more point I'd like to make, I've been doing this with you guys for a while now, is I've never had a renewal issue, by the way, never. It's never been a premium that was scary, like a quadruple jump or anything. It was just a tick up. And I've only done people like attorneys and people like that anyway, but it's just been a slight modification. And I've had nobody just not take the renewal. So shout out to you guys. You try to keep it more than fair all the time.
Absolutely. And, it's better to have some type of coverage than nothing at all. We pride ourselves on the fact that we are offering people who are not healthy coverage. A lot of the stuff is measurable, right? Diabetes, you can measure how well someone is doing with their care. And ALS, by the time people are diagnosed with ALS, it's too late. I mean, they're incapacitated. ALS is another disease that is hitting people young. My son just had a friend pass away from ALS, 33 years old. Took them almost 4 years to diagnose him. I mean, it was crazy. In 6 months, he was gone.
Well, this is why it's DI Awareness Month, Disability Insurance Awareness Month, and you're doing a great job here. Thank you for saying, listen, everybody, I owe you a conversation, as I say, every single week. You've got to get out there and do it, because you and I are at the age where, we could talk for hours about friends and acquaintances that we've lost in just the last few years. And Grayson already knows my list is longer than it needs to be. I just 47-year-old man. It's a dear friend of mine with 3 kids, 17, 15, and 8. 47, stage 4 esophageal cancer. Spent all of his time at Moffitt, actually in Tampa, trying until they said there's nothing left we can do. Yeah. And he passed away at age 47. And there was no hint 3 years ago that he was anything wrong.
Right.
3 years later, we had to go to a funeral at 4 years of age.
It's a silent killer, for sure. Silent killer.
Mike, Lori already touched on one thing that she did in her family planning that you've brought up on previous episodes.
Absolutely.
That all families should be considering, which is when the kids are leaving college, helping them get their own policies, even if that means helping them out for a few years to make sure they secure their coverage and insurability. So, Lori, we really applaud you for doing that. Mike's talked about that idea on previous episodes, and so I'm really glad that you shared that so our audience can take notes there.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And the big misnomer is that this coverage is expensive. And it really isn't. I mean, I think my daughter's policy is $100 a month. I mean, if you can't afford that and have that safety net, it's give up something else that you're doing and spending money on. And I will tell you that my kids keep up with their policies, and they will send me text messages, Mom, I just got a raise. I need to increase my coverage. And it's really, I had maybe 2 conversations with them because I don't talk about work at home. They certainly know what I do, but just a couple of conversations got them up to speed with what they need to do.
Lori, can you spend a couple of minutes as a kind of a sidebar here talking about some very unusual cases? You don't have to use names. It can be anything, Hollywood, athlete, whatever, but some unusual things you've done so our audience gets an idea of just how broad the spectrum of Lloyd's can be.
So I'll start with some kind of not too unusual. We write a lot of athletes. We just went through the NFL draft. A lot of those players were covered by a Lloyd's policy. Why? Because by the time they graduate college or decide to enter the draft, there's going to be, a gap between the time that they actually sign the contract after they get drafted from the time that they graduate college. And I think it's about 4 or 5 months. A lot of things can happen. And they do. We've seen a lot of people with ACL tears just in those 4 months, going to the beach, playing football on the beach. So, that's important coverage. Absolutely. But the kind of crazy stuff, I received an inquiry from a group producer who had a client that builds space pods, and he wanted coverage for some scientists that they were sending up in space. And that's really all he said to me. And I said, well, let me see what we can do. And in the meantime, someone had gotten me more information. Will these space pods have successfully connected to the International Space Center? This is accidental death coverage that they wanted. And so we covered scientists going up into space for I think they were there for 20 minutes or whatever. So we get stuff like that with all the war-torn countries that we send some people to work with them to come up with a peace plan. There's a lot of executives going over to Israel to help with that. Certainly, we just recently offered coverage to drone pilots going over to Ukraine to train Ukraine drone pilots. We get crazy stuff like that.
Step back for a second. You just made, again, a very eloquent point. Athletes playing flag football on the beach can tear an ACL. What about everybody else? These are going to be professional, and look where they get hurt on the beach, messing around with their buddies or whomever they're hanging out with. This is how it really happens, right?
Oh, yeah. My daughter tore her ACL, not cleanly, but a little bit different because she's young. Skateboarding. In college, she was skateboarding to class. And she was in vet school, actually, and she tore her ACL and couldn't walk. So just something as simple as that, and she's young. She shouldn't have torn her ACL, but falling on a skateboard, I guess that can happen. So, yeah, accidents happen, illnesses. There's a lot going on in the world today with illnesses. So it's important, definitely. And people often ask me why I'm so passionate about disability income. I grew up with a mother that was disabled. She became disabled at the age of 45, 3 kids in college, spent 20 years being disabled because of medical advances. So I just, she had group coverage, but not individual coverage, and ended up, she lost her home. And we had to, move in. We moved her into a small apartment. So, stuff like that happens, and you have to be prepared. There's no reason why if somebody becomes disabled that they have to sell everything they own. we're protecting the things that you own as well as your paycheck.
Well said. Well said. Lori, I think we'll leave it here for today. Thank you so much for your time and
thank
your
you.
insights. Yeah, anytime. And we'd love to have you back on to continue to talk about the importance of Lloyd's in the DI market. So thank you so much for your insights and your time today.
Thank you. Have a great week.
Lori, thank you so much. Appreciate you. Be well.
Thanks. Bye.
And remember, financial planning starts with a risk protection package first.
And your clients are counting on you. See you on the show next time.
All right, my friend, be well.